Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something really significant, especially if you're keeping an eye on current affairs for the UPSC exam. We're talking about the new UK-India Free Trade Agreement. We've sifted through the details, mainly using the Indian Express, to pull out the key stuff you need.
Absolutely. And this agreement, it lands at a really crucial time, doesn't it? Global trade's shifting, and you've got the UK and India, fifth and sixth largest economies, looking to, well, cement their position.
Right, so our aim here is to cut through the noise, give you the core of this deal.
Exactly. A clear shortcut to understanding it.
Okay, so let's maybe unpack the journey first. Nearly 3 years of talks. That's quite a while. It wasn't exactly straightforward, was it?
No, not at all. You remember that Diwali deadline talk back in 2022 during Boris Johnson's visit?
Ah, yes, I do. That came and went.
It did. So finally getting it signed in 2025, well, it's definitely a major milestone for both sides.
And here's something I found really interesting. The UK is actually the first major Western economy, so ahead of the US, ahead of the EU, to get an FTA done with India. Why is that so significant?
Well, strategically, it's huge. For the UK, it's potentially first mover advantage in, accessing India's massive growing market.
Okay.
And for India, having this deal locked in with a G7 nation like the UK, well, that gives them real leverage, doesn't it? Especially in those ongoing talks they have with Washington and Brussels.
Ah, I see. So it kind of sets a benchmark.
Precisely. It sets a precedent.
Right.
And it signals India's serious about forging these kinds of new trade partnerships.
Okay, let's talk numbers then. What's the projected trade increase?
The projections are pretty substantial. They're talking about an increase of about 25.5 billion in annual bilateral trade, but that's looking ahead to 2040.
Right, long term. What about now?
Well, just to give you context, in 2024, total trade was around 42.6 billion. That breaks down to UK exports at 17.1 billion and imports from India at 25.5 billion.
Okay, and where does India rank as a UK trading partner?
In 2024, India was the UK's 11th largest trading partner. So there's already a solid base, but clearly there's potential for a lot more growth.
Definitely. So tariff reductions and market access. Who gets what? Let's start with India's gains. What are the headlines there?
The big one for India is that 99% of its exports to the UK will now get zero-duty access. We're talking customs duties here, mainly.
99%? That sounds massive.
It is. And it's particularly good news for those labor-intensive sectors, which are so vital for jobs and, economic growth back in India.
Can you give us some examples? Which sectors are we talking about?
Sure. Think textiles, marine products, leather goods, footwear, sports stuff, toys. Also gems and jewelry, engineering goods, auto components, and even organic chemicals, areas where India is already quite strong.
Got it. Okay, flipping that around, what about the UK's wins? What access do they get into the Indian market?
So India's agreed to cut duties on 90% of its tariff lines. And within 10 years, 85% of those lines will be completely tariff-free. That's a significant opening up of the Indian market.
Any specific UK products that will really benefit? I imagine whiskey is one everyone talks about.
Whiskey is definitely the headline grabber. It's those really high Indian tariffs, 150%. They're set to drop to 75% initially.
Wow, that's a big cut.
Huge.
Yeah.
And it goes down further to 40% over 10 years. But it's not just whiskey. Big medical devices, advanced machinery, even lamb gets better access.
Okay.
And you'll likely see more UK cosmetics, aerospace parts, salmon, electrical machinery, soft drinks, chocolate, biscuits. Quite a wide range, actually.
Right. Now, beyond just goods moving back and forth, what about services and people moving for work?
Yeah, that's always a key part of these deals. The agreement does include some increased quotas for Indian workers, but in specific UK sectors. So it helps labor mobility a bit.
And there was something about social security payments.
Yes, that's quite useful. Indian professionals working in the UK get a 3-year exemption for making social security payments there.
Okay, interesting. Let's zoom out a bit then. Why now? What were the big picture reasons pushing both countries to get this deal done?
Well, several things were going on, in the background. COVID-19 really highlighted how risky it is to rely too much on single supply chains.
The whole China plus one idea.
Exactly. That strategy really gained momentum. The UK was actively looking to diversify its partnerships, and India was, well, a natural fit, a key target.
Makes sense. And for the UK, post-Brexit realities must have played a part too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Leaving the EU's single market meant the UK needed new trade avenues urgently. And India, with its huge and growing consumer base, that's a very attractive alternative market.
Plus, maybe some economic pressure at home for the UK.
Definitely. The UK has faced economic headwinds, like many countries. This FTA is seen as, a potential shot in the arm economically, and frankly, a political win too.
And what about India's motivation? Why prioritize this particular agreement now?
Remember, India pulled out of RCEP, that huge Asian trade pact, back in 2019.
Yes, I do.
Well, that decision meant India needed to actively pursue other major trade alliances. This FTA with the UK helps fill that gap, giving access to a major Western market. It fits into their broader trade strategy.
Right. Now, these deals are never simple. 3 years of talks suggest there were probably some tricky issues, some sticking points.
Oh, for sure. And it's interesting to look at some of the more nuanced takes, like the Global Trade Research Initiative, GTRI. They're a think tank focusing on trade.
What did they say?
They pointed out that actually a lot of India's exports to the UK already had pretty low tariffs, or even zero tariffs.
Ah, so the immediate jump in trade might not be quite as dramatic in some areas.
That's the implication, yes. It suggests we need a balanced perspective. The immediate surge might be more limited for certain Indian sectors than the headline figures suggest.
That's a really important nuance for understanding the real impact. What other challenges came up during the talks?
Well, India was pushing hard for better access for its service professionals.
Mm-hmm.
IT, healthcare workers.
But immigration is sensitive in the UK, especially post-Brexit.
Extremely sensitive. So what they ended up agreeing on was quite limited, apparently around 100 new work visas per year, specifically under this agreement. Not a huge number.
Right, and I think there was also something about environmental rules. Carbon taxes.
Yes, that was another point of discussion. The UK had proposals for a carbon tax or something similar on certain imports like metals based on their carbon footprint during production.
Which would affect Indian steel and aluminum.
Exactly. Indian exporters were concerned about competitiveness.
Yeah.
So that needed careful negotiation to find a way forward that wouldn't unfairly penalize Indian industry.
So clearly it's more than just tariffs and quotas.
Oh, much more. You should really see the FTA as a foundation, a platform for deeper collaboration across the board.
In what areas?
Defense and security, for instance, critical technologies, education links, tourism, and also, importantly, engaging with that large Indian diaspora in the UK.
So it's a starting point, not the end goal.
Precisely. As one Indian official put it, apparently, the FTA is the floor, not the ceiling. It really signals the potential for a much broader strategic partnership down the line.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Key takeaways. Widespread tariff cuts. Boosts for specific sectors in both India and the UK. Strategically important, puts the UK ahead of the curve with India, gives India leverage elsewhere.
Right, but also we need to keep those nuances in mind. The point about immediate trade gains perhaps being more modest in some areas for India, the sensitivities around worker mobility, the carbon tax issue, it's complex.
Absolutely. And for you listening, especially if you're prepping for UTSC, understanding this agreement is, well, it's crucial, isn't it?
It really is. It tells you a lot about India's current trade policy direction, its strategic thinking in a changing world, and the deepening economic ties with a major player like the UK. Getting into the specifics, who benefits, why the deal happened now, the challenges, that's all valuable context for understanding India's place in the global economy. Key stuff for your preparation.
Definitely. So maybe a final thought for you to consider, building on that GTRI point about potentially limited immediate trade gains for India in some sectors. What do you think are the most significant long-term strategic benefits for India from this FTA beyond just the trade volume figures? Something to mull over.
A good question to reflect on.
And remember, our main source for this deep dive was the Indian Express, so do check that out for more detail. If this was helpful as you gear up for your exams, please do like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment if you have more questions.